Hello and welcome to Tank and AFV News. My name's Tom, and today we are doing a book review. I've decided to do this one, and probably with book reviews from here on out, I'm just going to go with the overhead shot rather than, I don't think anybody really needs to be looking at my mug while I talk about books. We need rather be looking at the book, because it's a book review, that's what we want to see. So we'll do it this way, and that way I don't have to set up two cameras or flip back and forth on the editing. So this is Images of War, Hitler's Light Tanks, Rare Photographs from Wartime Archives by Paul Thomas. Now, this one was sent to me by the fine folks at Casemate Distributing for North America. This book's published by Pen and Sword. The author is Paul Thomas. And I've looked at a few of these Images of War. I think all the ones I've seen so far have been by a fellow named Anthony Tucker Jones, who I don't know much about. And Paul Thomas is not a name I'm familiar with either, so I'm not sure. It does say he's done a few other books on the back here. So he did German Half-Tracks at War, 1939 to 45, Panzer III at War, Panzer IV at War, Hitler's Tank Destroyers, and German Reconnaissance Support Vehicles. All part of this series. Said he lives in Braintree. I'm assuming that's in the UK. So yeah, he, I'm assuming, based on his titles, really likes collecting images of World War II German tanks. So this one follows the standard format for these Images of War books. It is 128 pages. It says 250 black and white photographs. It's a paperback, obviously, about 7.5 by 9.5 inches, so pretty standard size. So, you know, pretty comparable in dimensions to like an Osprey book, only more pages. And this one was released on December 27th of 2019, so it's only been out for a little over a month. And let me get rid of this, and we can start looking at the book itself. This book is, I rather enjoyed it, I will say. Personally, I find the early war German tanks more interesting than the late war stuff, partly because there's just not as much attention paid to them. You know, I think from a sales standpoint, you know, the general public probably responds best to Tigers and Panthers and the real big, impressive German stuff at the end of the war. That said, for me personally, I kind of find this early stuff more interesting because these are the vehicles that are equipping the German Panzer divisions when they're at the height of their success. So, you know, you're talking about Poland, France, Barbarossa, at least the early stages of it, where, you know, the German army as a whole is pulling off really spectacular victories, yet doing it with these, frankly, rather unimpressive vehicles on a lot of levels. Not that, you know, most early war tanks are, by today's standards, pretty unimpressive looking, but, you know, I think they're interesting looking. It's just sort of like people like old cars, with these old vehicles, you know, that are so, you know, you can tell that they haven't quite figured out exactly what a tank should be. You know, they're still sort of figuring out, you know, how the ideal size and format and whatnot. So these early vehicles are interesting because they are sort of an evolutionary step. They haven't gotten to where they're going to eventually be yet. So all that aside, the book is, I like the way it's laid out because it's arranged by campaign. So here we can see on contents, you've got Chapter 1 is Blitzkrieg era, so you're talking, you know, Poland and France. Chapter 2 is Balkans and Eastern Front, 1941, so primarily going to be Barbarossa pictures. Chapter 3, Battles in Russia, 42 and 43, and then Chapter 4 is later years, 43 to 45, and then an appendix listing sort of the different variants and stats to a certain extent. And as you can see from the page number, so like this last chapter is the shortest, because obviously these light tanks aren't getting a whole lot of use in these later years. You know, it's going to be these early chapters that have more content. So, like I said, the amount of text, you know, each chapter starts with like 3 or 4 pages of text, and then it's mostly images. So it's primarily photo book, and you can see this is one of the few pictures that actually jumped out at me that I was familiar with, that I've seen in other places. And when, you know, when I did my Panzer I Tanks of World War II episode, you know, I spent a bit of time looking at Panzer I pictures, and that's one image. But most of these images are new to me, so that's always good. So you can see like this early part. It's going to be a lot of Panzers 1s and 2s because, you know, we're talking about France, and they're going to be fairly early variants. So it is nice that they divide it up by campaign so that you can sort of see the development of these vehicles over time. You know, so Should give people a general idea of the layout and some of the photos. Obviously, I don't want to flip through the entire book, because if you want to see the entire book, you should buy it yourself and support the authors and publishers who do the work of making these books. So skip ahead here a little bit, see if we can get to the next chapter. Okay, Balkans and Eastern Front 41. So again, just a couple pages description, and we get into the pictures. The quality of the pictures varies. I mean, as you might expect, these are wartime pictures, and some of them, you know, some of them you can tell the focus is a little better than others. Some of them, you know, aren't the best, but that's to be expected, especially if you want to see stuff that you haven't seen before. Some of it might not be fantastic, because, you know, there's serious limitations to the photography of the day and the conditions that these photos are being taken. That said, the reproduction as far as the book seems pretty good. So I think whatever limitations in quality, that has to do with the source material, not with the publisher itself. And in fact, you know, you can assume that most of these images are larger than the original photo, that they've been blown up, because, you know, the photos people took at the time were, you know, pretty small format. One thing that's nice, so you can see here, it does also cover some of the self-propelled guns and other vehicles that were mounted on German light tanks, so it's not strictly just light tanks. So here we see the 47mm Czech gun on a French light tank chassis that the Germans did. So that's like a completely, everything, there's nothing German about that vehicle. It's captured gun on a captured hull. So Panzer, you know, once you get into like sort of the 41 campaign here, you're getting a lot more Panzer 35s become quite common. Yeah, we'll skip ahead. So yeah, certainly if you're doing a model of a Panzer 35, this would probably be a good reference, because that is featured quite a bit in this book. Here we have one of the early Martyrs. Starts to cover those. Here's some more of the Martyr series, which of course were all based on German light tank chassis, as they're trying to make them into some sort of useful tank destroyer. Here we get into the last year's 43, and like I said, this is a shorter one. Several pictures of the Vespa, the self-propelled gun, the 105. Here's some more Martyrs, and then just a couple pages of the Jagdpanzer 38T, you know, sometimes called Hetzer, which he does refer to it that in his, and for those who are really persnickety, he does actually refer to the 15 centimeter gun on Panzer I chassis as the Bison and Sturmpanzer, which I learned the hard way when I did my Panzer I video. Somebody said, hey, those names aren't really real, and I went to the source material that I had previously read and said, you're absolutely right. So but you know, it's a lot easier to say Sturmpanzer 1, so I'm not going to be too critical on that. So that is the book. Like I said, I enjoyed it. If you are looking for photos of German light tanks, this is going to be a nice addition to your collection. Like I said, these Images of War series, this I think is actually one of the better ones that I've seen in the series. So yeah. Retails for, I think, $25. I'm sure you get it probably a little less, or actually, sorry, $22.95 according to the sheet. So $23. You know, you probably even find a little cheaper online. So yeah, if you need pictures of Panzer 38s, Panzers 1s and 2s, all that good stuff, Images of War, Hitler's Light Tanks by Paul Thomas. All right, thank you to the folks at Casemate for sending me this copy to take a look at, and we will catch you on the next one.